Welcome to the Zachariah Frank Show. My goal is to help you live a healthier, more informed, and all-around better life. To do that, I'm exploring essential topics with industry experts and bringing you all sorts of helpful information. We're talking physical health, mental and emotional well-being, spirituality, relationships, philosophy, and more. Unafraid of any topic and unapologetic about the truth. If you like no-nonsense, deep and meaningful conversations, you're in the right place. There's plenty to talk about, so let's get to today's episode. A very fascinating guest with me today. He is a speaker, author, and international podcast guest that speaks on the topics of motivation, mindset, and self-development. He has a business administration degree from the Citadel, where he played NCAA basketball, and he has a master's degree from Boston University. Along his diverse professional roles, he has been a marketing executive, a hospital administrator, a SWAT hostage negotiator, and for the past 12 years, a cancer warrior. And in that fight, he saw the amputation of his foot and leg along the way. He's an author of the book Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And he's co-authoring a new book, The Perspectives on Cancer, Stories of Healing, Hope, and Resilience. His mission is to put as much goodness, positivity, motivation, and love back into the world during his remaining time here by making a positive difference in the lives of others. That is a Terry Tucker. Terry, welcome to the show.
Zach, thanks for having me on. Really looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly which direction we'll head in. I would have a couple ideas, and I think they'll all be good. So let's get into it, man. Let's start from the beginning. What were you like growing up? Like, what was the Terry of yesteryear, and what really shaped and formed him?
Yeah, I think honestly, my parents. I am the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall. And went to college on a basketball scholarship. I've got a brother who's 6'7", who was a pitcher for the University of Notre Dame's baseball team. Another brother who's 6'6", who was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers, the National Basketball Association. And then my dad was 6'5". So we used to joke that if you sat behind our family in church growing up, not a prayer's chance you're going to see anything that was going on, in the front of the church. But our 5'8" mother was the boss. It didn't matter how big, tall, strong we were. Whatever mom said, that's the way it went. So I had a great childhood growing up. Played basketball, played football, played baseball. And my parents really kind of taught us the value of service, of family, of loving each other, of caring for each other, of serving each other. And I think my brothers and I have both projected that forward in our lives. Both my brothers are in education. I was in law enforcement. So our jobs were service-related jobs, giving back to other individuals. And I think that's come forward with me, as you mentioned, over these last 12 years that I've been battling this rare form of what I was told in 2012 was terminal cancer, that I would more than likely be dead in 2 years. And I thought, well, you gave me a death sentence. Maybe I can turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And that's what I've been trying to do for the last 12 plus years now.
Yeah. I mean, hey, life itself is terminal.
Yeah.
Life itself is a death sentence, So a lot of times we can manipulate the timeline and, try to extend it a lot. And we often can in regards to the prognosis given to us by doctors. But yeah, life itself is terminal. It's a funny thing. That's very fascinating, though. It's so beautiful to hear stories that family units are so tight knit and so together and so loving. I could just feel beyond your words. I could feel how fulfilling it must have been to grow up in a house like that. It's very beautiful. And so you got into basketball. Was that always just a means to an end? Was it a hobby? Was that going to be your career, or was it just kind of like I'm going to do that to stay in shape while I also pursue the law enforcement career?
Well, I was 6'5" when I was 13 years old. And, kind of this real skinny guy with these big feet and had, kind of Dumbo ears. My head had not caught up with my ears. And you can imagine I got teased mercilessly. because of the way I look, because of my appearance. And, I could have taken that and said, woe is me, I'm being bullied and all that kind of stuff. But I took that and put it into basketball and was lucky. I mean, basketball is one of those sports where you just need a hoop and a ball. You don't need anybody else. It's not like baseball or football where you got to play catch or something like that. I didn't need anybody else. So I spent a lot of time honing my game, a lot of time studying the game, was more of a student of the game of basketball than I actually was a player. And so it was really out of a way to deal with being bullied that I got into basketball. And like I said, my brothers are all tall, they're all athletes. And so I had the opportunity, it was always great when my dad would play with us. We could play 2-on-2, and my middle brother and I are 13 months apart. So we're kind of Irish twins. We sort of grew up together. My youngest brother is 6 years younger than I am. And so he would always play with dad. And my brother, my middle brother and I would play, and we played 2-on-2. And even today, I mean, when my brothers come to visit me, they were here last summer, and they spent 3 days. We never left the house. We never turned on the television. It was just 3 days of laughing and telling stories and lying to each other. It's like, remember when that didn't happen that way? It happened this way. No, it didn't. It happened, so it was just such a great opportunity. And I was able to use my brothers, kind of to hone my skills. I had other people to play with, but yeah, basketball was just something I gravitated to because of my height and because of what was going on being so tall at such a young age.
So being so much bigger than your peers and yet being bullied, what do you think was the determining factor that you didn't go the route of, well, hey, my fist is the size of your head. Let me, you can solve bullying real quick like that. What made you not do that, you think?
I wasn't a tough kid. I mean, I really wasn't. I was kind of soft back then, soft, sensitive, that kind of thing. I wasn't a fighter. I didn't understand fighting. I didn't understand fighting back. I understood friends of mine who did that for me. Somebody'd steal my hat or something like that. My friends would go after them and get my hat back. But a lot of ways, I guess I was kind of a pacifist. I wasn't much of a fighter. I mean, that's certainly changed over my life, but I was soft back then. So, it wasn't, I didn't know how to fight back.
Were your brothers the same way?
Oh God, no! My brothers are tough as nails. Even back then, they were. My middle brother, dad called him Moose because he was like 10 pounds 9 ounces. My mother gave birth to a bowling ball. And he was the lineman and stuff like that. So he was a much bigger guy. And my younger brother, I think, just from being around older brothers, learned that he had it. The only way to survive was to be tough and was to fight back. So I think as the oldest, I didn't really have any role models that I could look at or anything like that. So I don't know. What about you and your family? Were you tough? Were you somebody that, had siblings that picked on you and stuff like that? How'd that work for you?
So I didn't get blessed with any brothers. I had one younger sister. So it was just myself as a male. And yeah, I at first was very shy. When I was growing up, I was the quiet kid. I was smart. I was more intellectual than my male peers. And so I just naturally gravitated towards hanging it with the girls more a lot during the early years of elementary school and onwards. And eventually I just made a conscious change. I said, this sucks. Don't like this. I don't like being the quiet kid who gets picked on. And it never really went too far because, I was just chilling, But there was one summer where I just decided to reinvent myself and started listening to music and embodying some more upbeat energy, started just really deciding to put myself out there. I started dressing differently, more provocatively, like more bright colors and big baggy clothing and jewelry and such. And then I just consciously decided to put myself out there and choose to be tougher because I didn't like the life that I was just living, being the quiet kid and somewhat getting picked on. So from then yeah, I was completely different and I was the tougher guy. And putting yourself out there comes with pushback, right? You're gonna get shit if you put yourself out there. It's just how the world goes. And so I dealt with it. I became bigger, and I've never been massive. I wasn't 6'5" at 13 years old, or even yet in my life. But um, yeah, I became muscular, worked out. I trained Muay Thai and Jiu Jitsu for several years when I was younger, and so like people knew, like people knew not to overstep, and when they did, they were swiftly met with the ramifications of doing so. So the answer is yes and no. I wasn't until I decided to be tough.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I mean, you kind of have to take the bull by the horns, and it's like nobody's coming to my rescue. Nobody's going to make this happen for me. You've got to do it yourself. And I learned that. I mean, I had weights in the basement. Our dad used to come home from work, every day, and especially in the summer, and it was like, "Did you work out today?" And you always felt bad if you didn't. It's like, "Did you hit the weights today?" No, I didn't, Dad. I mean, and you felt guilty because your parents bought these for you, and they're in the basement. They're right there. I mean, there's nothing preventing you from spending an hour of your day, working out and that. And my brothers and I always say, if we knew back then what we know today about training, about rest, about nutrition, about minds, oh my gosh, we would all been all Americans, all played professional sports. It was just we didn't understand. They didn't understand that stuff back then. And I think of the Chicago Bears. I grew up in Chicago, and the Bears would go to some small little college, in the middle of Illinois and have their training camp. There wasn't, it was just like, hey, you got hurt, put some tape on it and let's go. There was it wasn't the way it is today. It wasn't, the strength and conditioning coaches, the nutritionists, the psychologists that work with professional athletes to get the very best out of them. You just kind of went out there and did the best you could. See what happened.
Yeah, I love that you're able to eloquate that a feeling of back in the day, feeling, guilty if you didn't achieve and didn't progress in that way. Because I've had this conversation on several podcasts. I think shame is a fantastic motivator for men amongst other men. I think it's so necessary to have that feeling of guilt and shame for not achieving and not doing. And I feel like that's the ultimate propeller of a man to want to do better. And people argue with that, and people, no, we shouldn't shame, you shouldn't make people feel bad, it's not nice, and some people might not be able to, like it sounds like you're thankful for that shame and that guilty feeling because you lived through it and then thrived with it.
I mean, I did. My dad was my hero, and I think he was, really he was the male role model in the family. And he was a big guy. He had played basketball in college. He had played all kinds of sports when he was in the army and things like that. And so that's how we connected with our dad. It's, come on, let's go have a catch. Let's, all right, Larry and I'll go out and dad will be the permanent quarterback and we'll run routes and dad will try to, I mean, those are the time. I mean, when they were here last summer, we were talking about that. You remember when dad did this? Remember when dad did that? I mean, not that my mom wasn't part of the family. She was, but, she was the person, she was the glue holding it all together, but when you let dad down, when dad was disappointed in you, it was crushing. It was, oh, I let my hero down. I let the guy, who loves me, who wants the best for me. Not that mom did as well, but it wasn't as crushing when we let mom down. It was crushing when we let our father down.
Is your dad around anymore or no?
No, he died shortly after I graduated from college back in the 1980s.
And what was that like? Because then, especially as the firstborn, now you're number one suddenly. What was that experience like for you?
It was horrible. I mean, I graduated from college. I'm, all set to make my mark on the world. I going to really date myself now, but I moved home to find a job because, the internet wasn't even a thing back then. So, I'm trying to find employment. And I did. I found my first job out of college was in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, and their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. And I mean, it was it was crushing. I mean, they were literally in rooms side by side, and we knew they were dying. There was nothing we could do. My dad had end stage breast cancer, which back in the 1980s for a male, they were like, we have no idea what to do, for you. We're just going to throw stuff against the wall and see if it sticks. And he lived 3.5 years. And I believe he did because he had a purpose. He was in real estate. He loved real estate. He worked up till 2 weeks before he died. So it was crushing that he died, but it also gave me an opportunity to have some very personal, very poignant conversations with him, while he was laying in bed at night and things like that, to just kind of sit with him and just talk and things like that. And, I mean, you get busy, I new college grad, I'm first person in my family to graduate. I'm doing stuff. No, it's quiet time. It's time to talk about life and where we're going and what's going to happen after he dies and that. So it was, I was 25 years old when he died. And I know that's a man, but at the same time, I sure didn't have a whole lot of life experience. I kind of wish he'd still be here.
Absolutely. And what was the most impactful thing he said to you during that time?
Figure out your purpose. Figure out why you're here. And I knew what my purpose was. I really did, but he wasn't excited about it. He wasn't happy about it. And I guess let me give you the backstory. So his father, my grandfather, was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. And in 1933, he was shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad, who was an infant at the time, always remembered the stories growing up of what my grandmother used to say, that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us. Your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to get out, major in business, get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids and live happily ever after. But that's what my father wanted me to do. That's not what I felt I was supposed to do. So I kind of had a choice. I could have said, hey, Dad, no, you're dying, but I'm going to go blaze my own trail. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So understanding that, my first 2 jobs were in business, first with Wendy's, and then I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. And then, I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited till my father passed away, and then I followed my own trail, my own dreams.
And so what did you believe your purpose and your mission was up until that point that he was not in approval of?
I always felt, at one point in my life, it was to be an athlete. I was physical. I played college basketball. I did all this stuff. My brothers and it was always physical stuff. It was always sports related. And I really did feel my purpose was to be in law enforcement. And honestly, Zach, one of the things I'm most proud about in my life is that I never let that dream die. I graduated from college when I was 21, and I didn't fulfill that purpose until I was 37. But I never let it die. I never said, hey, I'm comfortable, I'm making good money, this is an easy job, just let it go, let it lay. It's like, no, I'm going to give all that up and go back, get into an entirely different line of work nights, work weekends, be away from my family for some. Because I felt in my heart, I felt in my soul that was really what God had put me on this earth to do as an adult. And now, as you mentioned in the intro, I think my purpose has switched or changed again as I'm dying. We like to think of purpose as a singular thing. At least in my life, it has been purposes plural that I felt I was supposed to do along the way. And, like I said, I am so glad I was a cop, because it wasn't who I was. It was certainly what I did for a living, but it was really something that was in my heart that I was supposed to do.
And when you did get that achieved and you were in the line of duty, was it everything that you thought it would be and more? Was it, some rose-colored glasses get shattered a little bit? What was your experience like in the actuality of it versus your expectations?
I loved it. I had, I started out as a reserve, kind of a part-time police officer when we lived in Santa Barbara, California. And, I was a customer service manager for an academic publishing company. That was my job that I was getting paid for. And I would do that all week. And then Friday night, I would come home, I would put on my uniform and I would go to roll call and I would work all night. And I would come home. My wife tells the story much better than I do. I would come home Saturday morning and she said, you would look exhausted, but you had this big smile on your face. Like, this was great. This is what we did this, and stuff like that. And so when our daughter was born and we moved back to the Midwest where we're both from, I said, look, I've been bitten. I want to do this full time. I want to go to the academy. I want to, do all this. And so, I ran, a beat in a marked car, in uniform for about 5 years. And you're going to laugh when I tell you this story. Then I became an undercover narcotics investigator, a drug cop. And then I got on the SWAT team and was a hostage negotiator. So I got to experience a lot of things during my law enforcement career that were just a blast. A lot of people don't get to experience.
And do you think that you remained that soft, young man kind of throughout that whole time, or did you get galvanized through those experiences, or like what, you know what I'm saying? Because I think some people that go into such extreme professions, they were like tough, 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 and then some were soft, and then it's like, how did that impact, you at your core and your personality, if any?
I mean, I definitely got toughened up when I went to college. I went to a military college. The Citadel is a military college. So, you get on there freshman year and it's Charleston, South Carolina. It's 95 degrees. It's 100% humidity. It sucks. It's uncomfortable. These little sand fleas are biting the heck out of you. They shave your head. You're marching around. I'm like, what the heck? I came here to play basketball, and I feel ashamed to say that. I didn't go there to get an education. I came here to play basketball. And I'm like, I was going to leave. I literally was going to give up a full 4-year scholarship and leave. And I remember walking over to the field house, still soft, walking over to the field house, tell the coaches, I quit. I'm giving up. I don't want this scholarship. And something was like, you know what? Why don't you go check and see if you've got any mail? And I went over to the student union, Mark Clark Hall. There was a letter in my mailbox. I took the letter, went up to the nosebleed section in the field house, and I tore the letter open. It was a letter from my father. And it was a 7-page handwritten letter that basically said, I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm amazed that you overcame 3 knee surgeries in high school, but pull your head out of your butt. Because he said, you have called home 7 times since you've been out there. And not once have you asked about your mother, your girlfriend, your brothers, your grandmothers, nothing. You are so in your head that you're going to screw this up. And I mean, literally, I was in tears after I finished reading this letter. My father had never written me a letter before in my life. And, I put that letter, folded it up, put it in my pocket, took out my handkerchief, wiped my nose and wiped my eyes and blew my nose and said, I can't quit. I can't do this. And that was the start of getting tough. And 4 years later, I ended up graduating.
Wow. That's beautiful, man. And so to back up a little bit, while you're growing up, you didn't mention you had any sisters, right? So it was just all men and then your mother, right?
Yep.
Did your mother try to soften you guys up at all? Or did she say, "Oh wow, I'm in this man's household and it's just gonna be the way it is"?
It's just going to be the way it is. I mean, Mom was, she was always at the grocery store buying more milk, buying more meat. You can imagine 3 growing boys all playing sports and stuff like that. We always had clean uniforms, but we also had chores, and it was always, especially in the summer, all right, you got to vacuum, you've got to dust, you've got to do this. And then she required an hour of reading before we could go play with our friends. And I hated reading. I love it now. I do it all the time. But it was like, Mom, come on. We're kids. The last thing we want to do is sit there and read a book. It's like, and you're like, literally, we're timing it. All right, it started at this time. Hey, it's been an hour. We got to go. We hated that. But we never got an allowance. My parents always felt, look, your allowance is you get to live here. We get to provide you food. You get to do these things, play sports. We pay for all that and that. So you want to make money? Go cut grass. go shovel snow, go babysit, go be an altar server for a wedding or a funeral or whatever it ended up being. You figure out a way to make money because what we're giving you is what we feel is in exchange for the work that you're going to do around here. So we never got an allowance or anything like that. So we had to make our own money, and you'd be ecstatic if you got a dime. You could go to the 7-Eleven and buy a pack of baseball cards or something like that. I mean, we loved doing that kind of stuff. We never wanted for anything. We were never what I would say was rich. But like I said, my parents always provided for, food, clothing, shelter, and the things that we enjoyed doing. So in a lot of ways, I guess we really were rich. What about you?
Well, which part of that? What about
one? I don't know, whatever works for you.
I don't know. There's a lot that you went into there. I don't know which one to go into. Yeah, you're gonna have to specify more, man.
Did you get an allowance? Were you required to work around the house? Was it?
No, I don't recall getting an allowance. I don't remember a lot of my childhood, to be honest. I don't think we ever got an allowance. And I don't think we were ever really required to do too much. Yeah, I didn't live in a very disciplined and structured household at all. So no, I don't think we had that. I did start working as soon as I was legally able to work.
Okay.
And before that, I was hustling. So I was one of those kids in school. I would bring my backpack. I was a very good student, straight A student with ease. And I would bring a second backpack in 7th and 8th grade full of soda and gum. And I would buy it wholesale and sell it for a lot. And so, yeah, I became that guy. And there's a couple. See, the trick was that there's a couple people in school doing it, but they were all bad. They were all bad kids that would give the teachers a hard time and be caught doing other bad stuff. Meanwhile, I was quiet, straight A student, chilling, helping kids out. And so I brought this whole. It wasn't covert either. It was blatant. I had a whole second backpack stuffed full and locks all over it because you got to protect the merchandise.
Sure.
And I would sell soda and gum for just exorbitant markups. And yeah, I made a lot of money. And then when I was able to legally work, I got a job at Six Flags amusement park, and I hustled there. And yeah, I started working as soon as I was able to because I wanted things. We grew up, I would say, lower middle class. And so we weren't, starving. It wasn't tough, but there's things I wanted and I didn't have because we couldn't afford it. And that's all right. But I wanted to go get it. So I went and got it. But yeah, that
You're
was
a young entrepreneur. You started early with your school business and that.
Yeah, it was awesome. My mother helped me out with that. She bought my initial stock. She stocked me up, and she would of course be the one to go to the store and get the stuff. And yeah, it was really cool. I'm very proud of it. I once sold a single can of Coca-Cola for $12.
Holy cow!
And that was back then, before all this inflation. Nowadays, a single can might cost $12, but back then that was nuts. But yeah, it's, the right place at the right time. You get supply and demand, right? So in my school, they were overrunning the school with more population than could fit. So we had the auxiliary trailers.
Mm-hmm.
It got hot when it was near the end of the semester. It was almost summer. It would get hot in there. There's no AC. And so I was in Spanish class, and it was hot. Everyone's sweating down to my last soda. Everyone wanted it. I auctioned it off. I auctioned it off to the highest bidder. And I remember exactly who bought it. And she gave me $12 for a can. And she was some rich girl who didn't care about money. And it was great.
That's pretty cool. I was going to say, do you remember who bought it?
I remember exactly who bought it. I wonder if she remembers. I wonder if she remembers. Her name was Nicole. She purchased a can of Coke for me from $12, and I'm very thankful. That's it. I'm very thankful for my Spanish teacher too, because we were done with the curriculum. He was like, whatever. I may have done the auction in Spanish to respect to the class, but
make it work well. Yeah.
Uno, dos, But yeah, so that was about me. We didn't necessarily get instilled the discipline and work ethic, and I found it. Uh,
Yeah, you did. That's pretty cool.
yeah. What would you say was the most difficult day of your life?
I would probably say the day my dad died. Um, well, yeah, well, without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people die in my life, especially being a police officer and stuff like that. Been there for a lot of people dying. Had a very good friend of mine die after having a bone marrow transplant. Was in the room with her when the doctors turned off her life support and that. But watching my dad slowly. I mean, my dad was 6'5" and was 250 pounds. And when he died, he looked like something out of a concentration camp. He was skinny and skin and bone and ashen color and just blotches all over his skin. And it was on the one hand, very thankful that he had passed, that he was not suffering anymore, that he wasn't going through all this. But at the same time, I just felt a huge hole in my heart. It's like this, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to live. I'd always gone to my dad, how do I handle this? What should I do? And my dad wasn't one to solve my problems, but he was certainly one to talk through them. What are you thinking? Why are you thinking that? What about this? Have you thought about that? So it wasn't like my dad lived my life, but he certainly gave me some really great advice. And like I said, I wanted to be a cop and he didn't want that. And he didn't want that because he wanted something better. He wanted, it wasn't coming from a place of malice. It was coming from a place of love. I want something better for you. I didn't think it was better. And obviously a long time later figured it out. But yeah, the day he died was horrible.
And what got you through that day instead of allowing you to crumble through it?
Oh, I crumbled. I mean, I'm a human being. There's no S on my chest. I do not wear a cape and fly around with magical powers. I mean, it was. I remember being at the funeral home, and my dad's boss came with his second wife and his three small sons, and he pulled my middle brother and I aside, and the interesting thing about my dad's boss was he had lost his wife years, or well, not that many years earlier, but when he had three very young sons, and she unexpectedly died of some rare illness. And he said to us, and I will never forget this. He said, "How this goes, how the wake and the funeral go, will depend entirely on how you and your brothers act. If you're positive, if you're upbeat, if you're laughing, if you're having a good time, not, but I mean, telling stories about your dad and things like that." He said that will put people at ease and people will gravitate toward that. He said, if you're sobbing and, this is horrible and this is terrible, he said, people will pick up on that. He says, I can't tell you how to act. He said, I know this hurts, this is killing you guys, but at the same time, you've got to understand that people will take their cue from how you're acting. And so that was one way of getting through it. And certainly leaning on my faith. I mean, I will never forget, it was time to close the casket and move from the funeral home to the church for the mass. And I was like, you're not closing that casket, because that was the finality of it for me, that I would never see you again. I would never, I mean, at least his body, I could see him. He was my dad. He was still there. And when they closed that lid and it's like, I'm never going to see you again, that was, I mean, I lost it. I mean, totally lost it when that happened. So my faith, certainly leaning on my family, and then, listening to my dad's boss and what he had to tell us.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and it's so true, right? Men create and shape the world, and they create the environment with which everyone else exists inside of. And so, yeah, the energy that we carry and the energy that we exude is kind of like the container for those that we care for to exist in. So, yeah, it's great that you were able to have those guiding figures even in that moment when you just lost your primary, to instill that within you. And, were you someone that was heavy into your faith before that point, or did that kind of really dive you into being faith oriented, or what was your relationship like with God before that and then after that?
It was good. It wasn't great. I mean, I had a lot of success in sports, and I kind of thought that was all me. Really, I was. I wasn't emotionally mature at that point in time. I had put in a lot of work. I put in a lot of hard work to get to where I was, and I didn't give the credit to something that was bigger than me at that point in time. I mean, I prayed a ton, for my father, wanted him to get better, and it didn't happen, So, it's like, well, I worked really hard and I got what I wanted. I'm going to pray really hard and I'll get what, dad will get better. Dad didn't get better, And so was I mad with God? Oh, I'm very mad. I mean, we had a few I had a few choice words, for God, but I figured, well, you created the entire universe. You could probably handle one, idiot down here and, on earth, being mad at you for a little while and stuff like that. But I mean, you look back on it now and you realize, my dad had taught us everything he was supposed to teach us. My dad, had done everything he was supposed to do while he was here on earth. And now I've taught you what you need to know. Now you got to go figure it out. Now you got to go, be your own man. And as you said, be the person who generates the energy, who builds things, who, makes a life for other human beings. And I was, I didn't think I was ready for that. I didn't think I was, at a point where I had grown up enough for that. And, it was kind of like, well, you better figure it out because there's nobody here who's coming to your rescue. Nobody here's going to do it for you. You either figure out or you sink. You sink or you swim. And so, I mean, that was kind of the way it was for me. What about you?
You got to be more specific with these what about yous, man.
No, you got to throw those out, just generalize, and you go with it what you want. I mean, how about, I mean, who was your hero? When is he or she still here?
No. So when I was growing up, the most prominent figure I had in my life was my paternal grandfather.
Okay.
He was the guy. He was a lawyer. He then owned a law practice. He was a sheriff. He was a judge. He was cool. He was stoic. He was very intelligent. And he had stature and he had prominence to him. And he died when I was too young. And since then, I lacked any sort of healthy and aspirational male figure in my life. And so I've just kind of been figuring it out myself along the way. So I, can relate in a lot of ways to the experience that you shared of wow, I'm never going to see this person again. And it was all on me, although it wasn't by my, the proper order of things. My family did get put on me when I was I maybe 12 or 13 even. My sense of time isn't fantastic, but yeah, so I do remember what that was like. It was difficult and it was a strange thing. It set forth some very strange familial dynamics because, like I said, it wasn't the natural order of things like it should be that I then became the most prominent male figure because my father, was and is still around. He just wasn't someone that was able to step up to the plate in that regard. So, and everyone knew that. And so I was the one that my family would turn to. And I wasn't ready. I was a child, and so that it certainly was a formative thing for me, and faced myself with a lot of struggles growing up. But yeah, he was.
What got you through it?
What other option is there?
Well, I mean, just look around. You see what the options are. These, you turn to drugs, you turn to alcohol, you turn to bad behavior, you turn to, horrible habits. I mean, you don't have to look very far. People do that all the time because they can't handle it. You obviously didn't do that.
What got me through? I don't know, man. Especially because back then I was godless. I was raised religious, but I turned away from God probably around that time. And I was a dumb atheist. I was so sure that, no, there's no way there's anything out there. Um, I don't know what got me through. I think I just always had a raw energy and a raw desire for achievement and for greatness. And yeah, I just had to keep going. And that doesn't mean I always made the right decisions. Far from it. But yeah, I just had to keep going. Just had to keep going somehow. And I knew I had reinvented myself before and made massive changes in myself and then got different life circumstances because of it. And that filled me with such a feeling of I wanted to change my reality and I did. So if I want to change my reality now, I can. I just need to figure out how. When I was growing up, like I said, I was a quiet kid. And there is that dichotomy that's programmed into people of there's quiet, not social, intelligent people, and then there's cool, social people that everyone likes and loves. And I broke that. I broke that dichotomy by becoming both. And I just knew I could do anything after that. And so yeah, I just kept going.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how are the family dynamics now?
Fascinating. Fascinating. Um, so my family was broken since the time I was young, from the time I was a child. My parents shouldn't have gotten together ever. It's a story of both of their unhealed child selves just acting unconsciously. Um, and I don't think my father was, I mean, I know my father had no business having a household and having a family, the way he was. And he knows that and he recognizes that. And, he just fell victim, but I don't want to say victim. He just never really rose up. We all have our shit. And he never just rose up against his childhood shit and never healed himself and never got himself together. And so he just became susceptible to the way the modern world breaks down a man. And his relationship structure was completely inversed. My mother had to be the masculine figure, so that made her miserable, and rightfully so. And she was the backbone of the household. She was the primary breadwinner for most of my life, while also being a caring and loving and supporting mother as much as she could. She was everything. And then he became nothing. And he was sad. He was angry. He was frustrated. He was just not, and he just never, never got himself out of it. And it's only been till now in recent times that I have gotten myself to the point where I am that he has been able to start or make any strides at all towards being a more healed person. And he still has a ways to go. And I'd like to, you know, make sure that, and not make sure because I can't make sure, but I'd like to see him go all the way to becoming the man that he has the potential to be. But that's up to him. That's not up to me. So my family lived together though. That's the see. This is the crazy thing. My family was living together over the years, but being broken. It was a broken family just in the same house, and that's worse. To me, that's worse than divorce and being separated because it's turmoil, it's chaos, just conglomerated into a household. And they always did the thing of, oh yeah, we want to stay together for the kids. I think it was just the easier thing to make that excuse. It's financially easier to not shake things up like that. The house was paid off, all that. But yeah, so that sucked. And then I moved out. Traveled for a few years. Then I came back, and then it's a funny scenario. So my mother and sister ended up moving out. They now live with my paternal grandmother because we had to get her out of her, senior living facility that she at one point enjoyed, but her health declined to the state where it was just a prison for her. And so financially, it worked out where they now live together, and I actually live with my father. And we are vastly different men. We have vastly different life ethos and philosophy, and we now have the best relationship we ever have, and I'm very grateful for that because we don't he doesn't clash with me. See, like I was alluding to earlier, when my grandfather died, I became the guy. And it's just a natural order of things that weakness despises strength,
Mhm.
and the darkness despises the light. And so while I was coming up, my father clashed with me because me just being me highlighted him not being who he was supposed to be being. And so I always wanted a good relationship with my father. Any person does.
Sure.
And I would try, but he just wasn't able to meet me where, in a healthy relationship. And that was very troubling for me. That's probably the most troubling thing for me growing up because I recognized what my father was not, and I recognized what I was, and I would just want nothing more than to help him be a better him, and then I would have a good father. And there was so many cycles of me thinking we were gonna be on that path, and then he would let me down in a drastic way. And normally, and it would end up in him, really going off on me and berating me and coming at me for and out of line, completely not appropriate. So there was long periods of time where I didn't speak to my father. We live in the same house, and it was, it was the healthiest thing for me to do to pretend he didn't exist. He didn't exist because there was no way to to deal with it. Certain people and the certain people, the way they choose to be, dealing with them is a lose, lose, lose. And that's very frustrating when you can't get away from those people, right? If you can just leave and not deal with those people, if it's a stranger on the sidewalk, then you could just leave. But when you're so deeply intertwined, due to familiar connection and living in the same house, how do you deal with that? When someone, no matter what you present, if you are adversarial, if you are friendly, if you are neutral, somehow you end up getting shit on. So it was just easier to pretend he didn't exist. And we had lots of cycles of that. And yeah, that was me, man. But nowadays he he ended up getting cancer, and he did get it cut out of him, and he got cancer because of his unhealthiness and the way that he chose to be. He got colon cancer, and that's very much what happens when someone lives with a victim mindset and feels that the world owes them and has resentment and rage that they're unable to let go of. That directly correlates with colon cancer. And that was a bit of an epiphany for him that he has to make a change. So he started making some changes, and a lot of them were false or, like kind of surface level. And I don't think he's quite calibrated to where a healthy man should be. He has certain habits and certain ways about him that I very much still think would be optimal to not do. And I try to offer myself as a guiding force as much as he's willing to take it. And he says that he wants to be better. He's been taking action recently to go in that direction, which is awesome. And I try to reinforce that. And I tell him I'm very proud of him for that. But, we've had an inverse relationship. We always have. And although it's not adversarial, we now we always will. I just got my shit together more than he ever did. So that's me.
Do you think you have a deep relationship with him now?
Define deep.
You define it.
Do we have a deep relationship? No. He can't meet me at the depths of a person that I am. And he knows this. And so what he likes to talk about and what he watches and what he thinks about and what he says is not what I want to watch or talk about or care about or is even worth my time. I'm a man on a mission. I don't give my time to stupid shit. I don't care to laugh at stupid things. I don't care to television. I don't care drama. I don't care gossip. And so and it used to bother him. At this point, he respects it, which I'm very grateful for. But he understands that if he comes to me and says something that is just meaningless, I'm just simply not going to engage because I'm busy. I'm either actively doing something or I'm thinking about something important. And so I literally just don't engage. But if he wishes to come to me with any sort of meaningful anything, then I'm very happy to engage with that. So, and we've had certain deep conversations. Like I said, he's working on himself now more than ever. But I don't think we have a deep relationship. To me, that's a very high standards thing. I'm open to it, but you just have to meet me where I'm at.
Interesting. I was listening to a podcast. This guy was talking about a psychologist at the University of Chicago who does this with his students, but also does it himself, where he will go out and get on a bus and try to start a deep conversation with somebody with just three questions. You know,
Yeah.
something like, "Hey, how you doing?" "Oh yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?" "You know, what do you do?" And I'm just making this up. "Oh, I'm a doctor." You know, "Oh, have you always wanted to be a doctor?" And you know, sometimes, "Yeah, you know, my father was a doctor," or "No, I wanted to be a vet instead of that." And he said, you know, in three questions, I can get somebody going on something deep. You know, so who they are, not what they do, but who they are. "You're a doctor. Why'd you become a doctor?" "Well, my parents wanted me to." I mean, I have a very good friend of mine from high school. The guy used to literally empty out his locker every night, go home, you know, study. We called him Doc. His nickname was Doc because he was going to be a doctor. We found out he never wanted to be a doctor. His mom and dad wanted him to be a doctor. So they always pushed him in you're going to be a doctor. You're going to be a doctor. You're going to study. You're going to do all this kind of stuff. And now he's a construction foreman for a large company. And that's what he wanted to do. That I like to build things. I like to do that kind of stuff. Mom and dad never listened to him. You know, they just pushed him where they wanted him to go. But I like can you have a deep conversation with another human being in three questions? Can you start that conversation by asking somebody three questions? Heck, a lot of us can't have a deep conversation with anybody after like 50 questions. You know, it's all surface. We all stay up here. You know, "Hey, how you doing?" I really don't want you to answer that question. I don't really care how you're doing. It's just something I need to say because I want to get on doing my own thing. That's how we interact with so many people. I really don't care how you are, but I mean that conversation, that deepness with other human beings is, I mean, to me at this point in my life, something that's incredibly important.
Yeah, it takes two to tango, right? You can only
Yes.
go as deep as someone is able and willing to go. And there's a lot of factors that play into that. You know, people have different blockages, different whatever that's going on inside of them that they just, I think some people literally cannot, and some people just aren't ready to, and some people, that I have no problem prying, right? I have no problem getting into someone's mind and soul. So like we have had deep conversations, but his just general baseline isn't that. But the small talk thing you say is fascinating because I've actually learned a bit about the small talk recently. It is nauseating to anyone that has a brain, right? But I understood the purpose of it. It's actually just a social calibration tool. it's like a survival instinct. It's like a social checking. Is this person safe? It's not about how you are. It's about this is like the norm of society. Is this person a civilized human? Depending on their response, like are they angry? Are they happy? Are they neutral? Do I think you're so it's a social calibration tool more than it is, about the actual words. Pretty
Yeah.
fascinating, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is because I remember when I was, when I was a SWAT hostage negotiator, I remember they gave us a formula when we first started. And the formula was 73855. And it had to do with how we communicate a message. I mean, when I say we, I'm talking about human beings, not, police and that kind of thing. And so 7% of how you communicate a message with another person are the words that you use. And think how many times in life you've been like, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. Or, I wish I would have said this differently. That's only 7% of how whatever the message is you're trying to communicate gets across. 38% is the tone of voice that you use. Are you assertive? Are you passive? Are you, like you say, neutral? I mean, what kind of voice are you using? Yelling at the person? Are you quiet? That kind of thing. And then 55%, so more than half of how a message is communicated is your body language and your facial expressions. And they told us that formula because as hostage negotiators, if you've got a gun and you're barricaded in a room, I'm not in that room with you. I'm many times blocks away on the phone or, at least outside the building talking to you on the phone. So you don't have the luxury as a negotiator of that 55%. You don't have the luxury of saying, hey, Zach, XYZ, and seeing you kind of roll your eyes and be like, what an idiot.
Yeah.
I can't believe he said that to me. And so you had to get good at figuring things out, certainly based on what people were saying, but also what they weren't saying and how they were saying it.
There's an energetic aspect to it too, right? Like I think even beyond the words, even if you don't see the person and their body language, their cadence, I think every millisecond of a pause can tell you a little something, right? That there's still that. And then did you feel that there was more of like an ethereal, spiritual side to those communications as well? Like, did you try to lock in kind of energetically and it's like, all right, what is this person feeling? Or was it very kind of hard, like
So
statistic?
exactly. So when we started, we used to do what was called, like I wouldn't say, hey, Zach, I'm Sergeant Tucker. I would say, hey, I'm Terry. What's your name? And a lot of times you don't need to know a name. Okay. What would you like me to call you? And so you're trying to develop, you're trying to take the authority out of it. This is just two people trying to have a conversation. And then we would get into what we used to call tactical empathy. I think you can get rid of the word tactical and just talk about empathy. Hey, Zach, help me to understand where we're coming from today. And the key word there is understand. I mean, if I'm negotiating with somebody that just murdered three people, I wasn't going to agree with you. I wasn't going to say, you were right or you absolutely should have murdered those three people and that kind of thing. Because if I can get you to a point where you think, or I do understand where you're coming from, understanding builds trust, and trust gets me to a point where I can try to get you out safely or get the hostages out safely. So, I mean, it wasn't an unnatural thing. It wasn't something, we were trying to pull the wool over them. It was just helping me to understand where we are today. Because there were a lot of times we'd show up on scene with a barricaded person or somebody to take an hostage. We had no idea why we were there. Why did this person do what they did? So you're starting from I don't know. So help me understand. And so that understanding, the problem we had usually was that the person was just usually emotionally irate. And that's not a time when you're talking about solutions. That's not a time you're talking about putting the gun down, letting the hostages go, coming out. You need to let them burn that emotional energy off so that you're dealing with their rational brain and not their emotional brain. Because we all make better decisions with our rational brain than we do with our emotional brain.
And so what were the common threads behind these people's whys and whats and like what was the Like, why are these people doing these things?
I mean, yeah, and that was always a great thing. So, like I said, you don't know. You're trying to get an understanding of why you're there from talking to this person. So, I may be the primary talking to the person. Well, sitting right next to me is another negotiator listening to everything that's being said both ways. And then we had 3, 4, 5 other negotiators kind of gathering intel, working the crowd. Why are we here? What happened? What precipitated this? So, as the primary, you may get a note from the secondary that says, don't talk about his mother. Because the people in the crowd found out that he had a huge fight with his mother. His mother kind of pushed his buttons. He grabbed a gun. He barricaded himself in a room. It's like, okay, now I understand a little bit more about what's going on. So, a lot of times, alcohol was involved. I'll give you kind of a funny story. I was a sergeant, I was in uniform, I was working nights, I was in a uniform car, and we get a call up. And so I was able to get to the scene fairly quickly. I'm talking to the officers in the district. I'm like, what's the deal? He's drunk. He's barricaded himself in his house. He's got his wife as a hostage and he's got a gun. I said, okay. Did you got him on the phone? Yep. So let me talk to him. So we start talking. And Zach, it's usually hours into a conversation before you start talking about solutions, putting the gun down, letting your wife go, that kind of thing. But I just had a gut feeling with this guy. And so I said to him, what would it take for you to come out? And there was this long pause. And he said, give me a beer. And I was like, if I gave you a beer, do I have your word you would let your wife go and you would come out? He said, do I have your word I could drink it? I said, you absolutely have my word you can drink it, but you're not going to get it until you promise me you're going to put the gun down, you're going to let your wife come out, and then you're going to come out. He said, yeah, I'll do that. So I gave $5 to one of the cops. I said, get out of the store, buy a beer. The tactical team put it on the front porch. I call him back, and I'm like, your beer's on the front porch, but you don't get it until your wife comes out and you come out with no gun. And he hit me again with, do I have your word I can drink it? And I said, you have my word, you can drink it. All of a sudden, the front door flies open. Here comes his wife, with her hands up. He comes out with his hands up. We handcuff him, let him drink his beer, and off to jail he went.
Wow.
Yeah. Very atypical. Didn't usually happen that way.
Yeah, right. That sounds like a pretty straightforward solution there. The liquor really had him, man.
Yeah.
And it's funny, but it is quite sad because far too many men, I think, are so close to the brink of some sort of crazy shit like that because they have these pent up emotions and have no feeling of an outlet and no feeling of how to deal with them and just succumb to the like inner chaos of the burning fire within them. And I think this is only getting worse. I think those flames are getting stoked within the, minds and broken souls of men. And I think this world lacks proper masculinity and healthy masculinity. And men are told to behave like women and behave emotional and behave, like not like men, because if you are like a man, that's bad in every way. And that's why we see this chaos that we see today, because men have no understanding of what it actually even means to be a man anymore, because being a man is experiencing those emotions and being a man about it, figuring out what to do, figuring out healthy action to take and move forward with, instead of just succumbing to, acting out of feelings, because that's what all these people are doing. I feel angry, I'm going to take a hostage. And it's a cry for attention, which is immature in and of itself. It's very immature and it's very emotional and it's childish. It's unhealed children running around. I think most men are just unhealed little boys running around and they don't have any passage into manhood that they're supposed to have, and they don't have any guiding figure on how to calibrate themselves at all. And I think that's the absolute epidemic right now beyond anything else, because that's what causes the chaos of today.
I would totally agree with you on that. And I think we did ourselves a disservice when we stopped, drafting or making people go in the military for a couple of years. Seriously, I mean, to have to deal with something difficult. I mean, men have to give up their innocence to see what's going on in the world. And I think that's the problem. You can't do that because, I mean, what did team sports teach me? It taught me how to win. It taught me how to lose. It taught me how to be coachable. It taught me how to deal with people on the team that I didn't get along with or I didn't like or that didn't have the same background. I mean, it taught me so many things. But what do we do now? I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was the University of Louisiana baseball coach who had a saying, and I'm going to kind of mess this up. It was like, how long can you, or something to the point of how much can you do to make your team tough before somebody who's weak comes along and tells you you can't do that any longer. And that happens all the time. That happens where, you can't say that to my kid. Let somebody yell at your kid. Let somebody tell your kid, I'm sorry, you're not putting out the effort. You're not doing what's necessary to play or to be a starter, or to be in the game, when the game's on the line. Figure these things out. And I think, I grew up going to the Citadel, being yelled at and screamed at and having to march in the heat and the uncomfortableness. And we didn't have air conditioning. And, you got a 30-second shower, all those kind of things. You either grow up or it breaks you. And I love the line, Ernest Hemingway wrote a book called Farewell to Arms, which is a semi-autobiographical depiction of when he was an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. And he's got a line in there that says, life breaks everyone. And afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. And I love that line. I think about that line all the time. This is hard. This is difficult. But what am I going to learn from this? How is this going to make me a better man, a better husband, a better father, a better friend? Because you're right. I mean, I had a great role model in my dad in how to be a man. My brothers and I had that. And, I think my daughter will tell you, I married my father. I married somebody who is a man. He's also in the military, as is my daughter. And, it's like, okay, I didn't have any sons, but I have a daughter that married somebody that knows how to be a man.
Yeah, and I'd love to wholeheartedly agree with that as a proposed solution. I don't, unfortunately, because of the corruption and co-opting of our government and military forces. And so I think, unfortunately, though the lessons are fantastic in that toughness way, I don't advocate for people being, the essentially military of the bankers and the corrupt interests, which is a very unfortunate circumstance. That is the reality. But yeah, I don't, that it is such a fantastic way in those ways, of those mental fortitude and physical fortitude things. And I think nowadays we are seeing independent structures and things that can happen or it can be, partaken in to get that, maybe not to that systematic level of the military, but yeah, it's unfortunate that how the corruption has lessened the appeal of that route.
I mean, it has, but I'll give you a couple statistics. So the United States Marine Corps is the only branch of the military right now that does not have a problem with recruiting to get to their numbers every year that they need. Everybody else is, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, Space Force, they're having a hard time getting to the quotas that they need just for people that retire and leave and things like that. The other thing that I thought was interesting is 163 of the Fortune 500 companies are run by men or women who at one time were members of the United States Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And it's like, whatever the Marines are doing, we got to figure out what they're doing. And I remember hearing a sergeant major say to a congressional hearing, sir, we're never going to lower our standards. We're never going to lower what we expect just to meet the quota that, we need. We're going to maintain our standards. And that may be the issue. We'll take anybody. Same thing in law enforcement. I mean, when I became a cop, there were 3,000 people that took the test for 100 slots. There were 2 classes of 50. And today, and this is just in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I still have friends that are there. Today, they're trying to put together a class of 60 recruits. 300 people took the test. It's like, you're either not going to get what you want, or you're going to have to lower the standards to get 60 people into that class. I don't want my cops having their standards lowered.
Well, that's the society we live in. Everyone's a bitch, and every standard of society has been lowered and lowered and lowered in these social engineering names of, equality and diversity and all this garbage. And yeah, that's the reason for the dismantling of every single establishment. Aside from the nefarious backbones that most of them have, you lower the standards of the people within it, then yeah, it's not going to last for very long,
Yeah.
and there's is it all just good intention that went wrong? Is it nefarious intent that they understood exactly what would happen? Those that made these changes at the top all along, perhaps. It's a fascinating thing that we see occurring. Again, I'm not a fan of any of the establishments, that be the military, the educational system, any of these colleges. But yeah, they've lowered the bar, lowered the bar, lowered the bar. They deny the high achievers again, in the name of all these bullshit equality programs. And so, yeah, everything's turning out morons and weak people. And, when society is catering to the lesser individuals, then how do you not get a lesser society? I think we've deviated so far from the natural order of things. People are allowed to be stupid and be weak and be dumb and be coddled, whereas the natural order of things in a more natural society, that person they would die. We don't allow people to even die due to their own horrible choices anymore. That's a very negative thing for humanity at large, and for the gene pool of humanity. And that's very harsh, but it's just true. It's just true.
What happens? Yeah, you see companies that are, okay, you're unproductive, you don't show up to work, you don't do things. Oh, and we're going to give you an award. We're going to reward you. And yet these people, the small group over here that's putting out all the work, that's grinding, that's working hard, we're not giving you anything. We're not even telling you you're doing a good job. We're going to coddle the weak, the people that don't do it. I'll give you a true story. So my youngest brother is a basketball coach in Illinois, and one of his assistant coaches works for, I can't remember what, Ernst & Young or one of the big sort of accounting groups. And he said, one day I'm sitting at my desk, this is my brother's assistant coach, and he said, one of the partners comes in and says, and I don't remember the woman's name, who's Mary Smith? And he said, oh, she's a new graduate we've just hired from college. She's, got a lot of promise. We're looking for good things from her. Why do you ask? He said, because her mother just called me and wants to know why she won't be home for Christmas. And you can imagine my brother's like, hey, I'll take care of it. I'll call the mom back. And the partner said, oh, no. I'll call the mother back. I'll tell her, oh, Mary absolutely can be home for Christmas, but she doesn't need to come back after the first of the year.
Oh, damn. Well, that one's rough, because who knows? Mary could be cool. Mary might be cool and just have an insane mother. That does happen.
Yeah, but I mean, you would never let your mother do that for you. I would never expect my mother to do that for me. You're going to call my work?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? No.
Well, we don't know what part Mary played in it, so I'm going to be Mary's advocate in this one. Maybe she was cool and just had a psycho mom. That does happen. But
it does. But yeah. Mary didn't have a job after the first of the year.
So. Oh, damn! Oh, Mary. Damn. Rough.
That's what you're talking about. It's that kind of, it's the helicopter parents that want to solve everybody's problem. And how dare you say anything bad to my kid or make my kid grow by experiencing adversity or difficulty?
So we have about 13 minutes left. I want to dive a little deep into these 4 truths of yours. When did you come up with these 4 truths, and why did you settle, or what formed these for you? We could go into each one a little bit, but
sure.
Why did you?
And you're going to laugh at this. I was on a podcast called My Three Truths. And I thought, well, I better come up with my three truths. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to talk about it. And it really did give me some time to kind of really think about what was important in my life. And I added a fourth one just because I felt it was that important. And, we, as humans, we like things in threes, but I felt, you know what, these are sort of the bedrock of my soul. These are things that resonate with me, that I think about, that I implement every day when I live, as I'm going through cancer and when my dad died and all that kind of stuff. So these are just important things for me. I have them on a Post-it note here in my office. So I see them multiple times every day, and they constantly get reinforced in my mind. They're just one sentence each. So I'll give them to you, and then if you want to dive deeper into them, we can. The first one is control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and difficulty to make you stronger, to make you a more resilient individual. The third one, and this is the one that I added, I think is more as a legacy type of truth, and it's what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And like I said, I look at those four truths, I kind of call them the bedrock of my soul. I think they're just a good place to try to start to build a quality life off of.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first one is so huge. It's people are so out of control. They have no bearing on themselves. So many people are just a feather in the wind of life, and succumb to being blown in any direction that any external factor exposes them or pushes them into. And that comes in the form of media. It comes in the form of, any conversation they have that might not go favorably. That comes in the form of, I don't know, you stubbed your toe or tripped, and now your whole day's ruined. And, most people are living so out of control, but is it the mind that ends up controlling them, or is it just like something else, like emotion or external influence? Like what does it mean if someone's mind is controlling them?
So I guess let me answer that with a story. When I was in college, and I'm going to use the military again as an example. Well, I went to a military college, and one year we had a president by the name of James Stockdale. And Stockdale had been a naval aviator during the Vietnam War and was actually shot down in 1965 and spent 8 years as a prisoner of war, the longest held prisoner of war at the infamous Hanoi Hilton prisoner of war camp, and actually won the Medal of Honor for his basically organization of the prisoners to kind of rebel against the Viet Cong. And I didn't spend a lot of time around Admiral Stockdale, but I remember being at an event where he spoke, and somebody said to him, "Who were the people that survived that brutality, that torture, that abuse?" And he said, "Well, let me tell you who didn't survive." He said, "It wasn't the big, strong, tough guys who thought that they could handle any kind of abuse or torture." And this really surprised me, the second thing he said. He said the other group that didn't survive were the optimists. He said these were the people that thought that they would be let go or rescued by Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter. And he said Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter would come and go, and they wouldn't be released. And he said those people died of a broken heart. He said the people that survived were the people who understood what they could control, which according to Stockdale was basically the breathing in our lungs and the thoughts in our mind, and controlled it. He said everything else was at the discretion of the enemy. When we slept, when we drank, when we ate, when we got abused, when we got tortured, everything was at the discretion of the enemy. And honestly, Zach, I think that's where people get off go off the rails. They try to control all these things that are going on in their life. And what I always recommend to people when they get into that situation is take a piece of paper and write down everything that's bugging you, everything that you're pissed off about, everything that's preventing you from moving forward. And then go through that list and cross out everything that you don't have control over. And then focus on the stuff that you can control. And I think when you do that, it kind of kind of get you to a point where life is a little more manageable. I'm not trying to control all this stuff that's going on outside my purview.
Yeah, there's the psychological schemas and verbiage of it. There's a graphic image that can be used to represent it. There's three concentric circles, and the innermost is the circle of control. Bigger than that is the circle of influence, and then beyond that is the circle of concern. And only through focusing on that circle of control can you expand it, and then you can control more things, and then you can influence more things, and then you can be concerned by less things. And yeah, people don't take action because ultimately control is only representative by what we can take action on and do. And people even just don't do that. Like a lot of people know what they can do. Everyone kind of knows what they can do, right? If you're fat, you can work out. If you can eat better. If you don't have money, you can get a better job. If you can't get a better job, you can learn more skills. Like if you don't have a good relationship, you can work to fix it, or you can work to get a different one, or you can make yourself more desirable. Like, but people don't. People don't take action. That's the crux of humanity, the crux of progress, the lack of actual genuine raw action, because that's the only thing that does anything. And out of this coddling and out of this softness and out of this weakness, we just cater to inaction because people have been propped up and and again able to survive without taking action. Oh, you don't work to feed your family? Don't worry, we'll subsidize that. It's relevant at all levels. Oh, you made yourself so unhealthy that this is happening. We're gonna save you. You do drugs and now you OD. We're gonna save you. Like people, this goes back to the natural consequence. People have been allowed to not take action and not be accountable for their actions, and so they just are existing. It's very unfortunate, And again, all things have a lot of factors. There's always environmental and societal factors that are creating very difficult and increasingly difficult and chaotic environments. There's, of course, the poison in the water, poison in the food that has people disconnected from their different, brain areas. And, a lot of people's brains are calcified and fluoridated. And yeah, it does make it hard to even cognate on these things. So I get that. But the only thing that really solves anything is raw action. And so for the people that are so deep into circumstances that they're vegetables, then I'm sorry, right? But this kind of ties into your fourth one that if you don't quit, then you're not defeated. If you're still alive, you're still in the game. If you still have sentience and consciousness, you're still in the game. You can do something, and maybe not much. Maybe you don't have a lot of cards to play. Maybe you have very bad cards, but you got to put something on the table and make the best move possible, or that you think is the best move possible in order to get where you need to be. And it's sad that a lot of people have given up. I think that's an epidemic too. People just having no hope, like you told in that story, that there's just no hope. They feel like there's no way out. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. They lack support structures. They lack positive influence. But I don't think anything can be done for someone that doesn't choose to take control of their scenario and of their situation and of their own life. You can't help someone that doesn't want to help themselves. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. God helps those that help themselves. You can't just sit around with a handout. Nothing gets done with that. But yeah, people aren't in control of their own mind. They just allow themselves to be influenced and don't filter or select what influences them, because we're all being influenced always. That's just the whole purpose of this external world. But what they can choose right now is to filter and analyze what is influencing them. Is that bringing them in a more positive or more negative direction? Is this message or the messenger or who sent the messenger in my favor, or someone that even likes me, or someone that wants me and my people to die and suffer? And then you can curate your reality from there. And it starts with controlling your mind. Absolutely. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, you're talking about taking action. I think you even step back before that, because I think small minds and weak people kill big dreams. I think so many people never, ever in their entire life contemplate what it means or what it looks like to be good or great at anything in their life, anything at all. And I remember hearing a saying one time that said, the richest real estate in the world is our cemeteries, or are our cemeteries, because they're areas rich in books never written, businesses never started, relationships never pursued. I always tell people, when you get to the cemetery, don't have those regrets.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people, their regrets at the end of their life is what they didn't do.
Yeah.
I think that's the common thread whenever anyone does pollings of, older individuals or people that are near their grave. It's never what they did do. It's never, oh, I hate that I tried this and it didn't work, or I thought this was a good idea and it wasn't. It's the inaction that is the greatest regret.
Yeah.
Amongst most people.
And I think that comes from fear. People are afraid. And whenever, especially when I speak to young people, I always tell them exactly that. If there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Terry, I want to check in with you on time, because there is at least a bit more to this conversation to really get it healthily concluded. I want to dive at least more deeply into the remaining truths. I do have to go to get to an appointment very soon. Would you be willing to hop on another, even if we don't do a full session, of course, like maybe another half hour, an hour, and we could tack it on to the end of this?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. Awesome. I'm loving this energy. This is amazing.
We're all over the place, aren't we? I mean, this is great.
Yeah, and that's why I want to at least tack on a little bit more to kind of wrap it all back into these 4 truths as a funnel, and then hear a bit more from you. So
perfect. Do you want to just send me? Do you have a calendar? I forget how we.
Yeah. I have a calendar. Yeah, I'll send you one.
Send me that, and I'll pick a day relatively soon, and we'll wrap it up and get it going.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun.
Me too.
We have a lot we could even talk about. But yeah, I definitely want to make sure that we give a due, wrap up to it. I don't want to rush it and cram it. I just have something that I got to run to. Awesome, man. I mean, quick feedback though. You're enjoying it? You're having fun?
I am. I like, I like your take on things. I mean, we don't agree on everything, but that's okay. And again, I think that's one of the problems in today's society. You're yelling and screaming at each other, and if you don't agree with me, then you're a bad person. When did you become bad just because we don't agree?
Yeah, that's part of the psyop. It's part of the division and the dividing. I love disagreeing when with some of my people on here respectfully, because otherwise, what's the point of you being here? I could have just talked shit myself,
Exactly. So this is great. Well, hey, go do your appointment, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you very much, Terry. We'll talk soon.
Right. Take care, Zach.
Thank you for joining me again, Terry. I really appreciate that you did join us again, and I hope the audience appreciates it too, because these last closing bits, I imagine, are going to be so critical and so essential, and really full of value. So we're going to get right back into it. We touched upon your first of the 4 truths, which is controlling your mind or it will control you. And we've, of course, glossed over some of the other ones in our previous conversation. Of course, they naturally came up in certain degrees, but I really want to flesh them out and hash them out to, and give them their due justice. So the next truth of yours, and it seems rather self-explanatory, is embrace the pain and difficulty we all experience in life and use that pain to make you more resilient. of course, again, that's a very clear one, but please, I'd love to know why this specifically was so essential for you to include in your four truths.
Well, Zach, first of all, thanks for having me back again. I'm looking forward to talking with you. The reason this is so critical is because our brains are hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort and to seek pleasure. So to the brain, the status quo, the way things are right now, hey, it's comfortable and familiar, leave it alone. But the problem with that is, and we all know this, the only way we're going to grow, the only way we're going to improve, the only way we're going to get better is if we step outside those comfort zones and do things that make us uncomfortable. I used to coach girls' high school basketball when we lived in Texas, and I would constantly remind my players that they needed to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, which always kind of blew their mind. They're always trying to figure that one out. I mean, pain is inevitable in our lives, but suffering is optional. Suffering is what we do with that pain. Do we use it to make us stronger and more resilient? Or do we wallow in it and feel sorry for ourselves and want other people to feel sorry for us? And so I think there's one of my favorite writers, Ernest Hemingway, in his semi-autobiographical book called Farewell to Arms, where he was an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. He had a great line, and the line is this: life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. So just like if you were to break your arm and a doctor would set it and put it in a cast, when that arm healed, it would be stronger at the point where it was broken. That's a metaphor for life. That's exactly the way we live our lives as well. Can we be stronger with the adversity that we face?
Is that true about bones?
Yeah.
That's how that goes? Really?
Yeah, that's exactly true. If you break your arm, when it heals, it will be stronger at the place that it broke than the rest of your arm will be, or your leg, or whatever. Yeah.
I might just go jump off a house or something.
No, don't do that.
I'll be superhuman. I want them to grow back stronger.
Don't do that.
I wonder if anyone's ever done that. I'm sure someone, upon hearing that information, may have done that.
Yes, and who knows? You may have enticed somebody to do it now. It's like, hey, Zach said this. I'm going to go up and jump off the roof.
Yeah, you said it, Terry. You said it. So, it's such a great point. It is a very basic one, this whole truth, but it is so crucial to really dive into. And do you think it's actually ever in a healthy way possible to feel comfortable? Like, is actual comfort beyond, okay, this chair is comfortable, this bed is nice and soft? Like, do you think it's actually possible as a human to be contented to a deep and like meaningful way, like level?
It's a great question. And I don't know. You see a lot of people that sort of, they're content to sit on the couch all day and, watch TV or, read a book or do whatever, but is that true contentment, or is that just rest and relaxation? And, one of the things that I do every day, and so I will recommend this to your audience to help you become more resilient, is to do just the opposite. At least once a day, do something that scares you, that makes you nervous, that's uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things, those little things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we unexpectedly get let go from our job, we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you will be so much more resilient to handle those big things if you do those small things every day. But because we don't like to do those uncomfortable things, our brain sort of kicks in, says, don't do that, just be comfortable. So I don't know if I have a good answer to that question. I mean, comfortable, content, I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think a lot of people exist in a state of false comfort. And that means, that comes from them avoiding more actively uncomfortable things, such as taking action and doing work. So then they suffer a more passive discomfort and just a long lasting discomfort that comes from not taking the action. But like either way, it's uncomfortable. And I think the only way to escape that a lot of the times is in unhealthy options. is in like drug induced states, or diving into consumerism, and just diving into escapist tactics and maneuvers like TV and all these different things, or even just hyper socialization. It's yeah, like I've come to think that like being uncomfortable is just a human condition. Like it's just a factor of life, and so you can choose the discomfort that you could rearrange the discomfort and try to get into a better scenario, but that usually means through action. And sometimes that action is internal restructuring, but that even itself is action and takes work. And it just makes me think of how even just recently, I sit down way more than is healthy for a human body in a chair just to do all the work that I do. And so sometimes my back hurts. And there was just one day recently where my back just, God, it hurt. And it just like was just a lasting, achy pain. And I'm like, oh God, like I can't even sit in this chair anymore. And I thought about it and I was like, oh, should I lay down? Maybe laying down would make it feel better. And I tried that for a bit. Like, all right, let me do some work on my phone and then just lay horizontal for a bit. And I just didn't do it. I got back in my chair after a little bit and oh my God, it just ached right away. So I said, all right, obviously that was the wrong approach. That was a more passive rest and relaxation approach. So instead, I just turned around, picked up those weights back there, and worked out my back. Specifically, worked out my back and got a great pump, got a great exercise in, sat back down in my chair to do more work. Back felt fantastic the whole rest of the day and the next day. And I think it's just a perfect example, like I was uncomfortable. The only solution was work. Yeah, it was work and uncomfortable to get that pump. Working out is fun, but it's not comfortable, and when it's meaningful and in a good way. But that was the only way out, straight through the fire.
Yeah, and I'm right with you. I mean, I'm in a wheelchair. I sit 90% of the time. It's being on one leg. It's hard to stand for any appreciable amount of time. So I mean, every morning before I get out of bed, knowing that if I do exactly what you're saying, if I'm going to sit in a chair all day, my back's going to kill me by the end of the day. So I have to exercise my back. I mean, first thing I do, I don't even get out of bed. I do exercises in the bed to strengthen my lower back and things like that. So I heard an advertisement one time that said, sitting is the new smoking. Now, I can't prove that. I don't know if that's true. But, in a lot of ways, I mean, we're designed to move. We're not designed to be sedentary type of creatures. So, yeah, exercise. But it also, as you said, yeah, it's uncomfortable, but it also produces, the endorphins and dopamine and things like that. They're like, yeah, I feel good. I worked out. I sweated. I did that stuff. So.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then that's interesting that you recount that experience of hearing that message. Did that hit you in any sort of like weird way? I mean, you don't take it as someone that, feelings get hurt over every little everything, but how did that feel as someone that is chair bound in to a large regard? Like, did that feel like you know?
Yeah, I did. It was like, great. I've never smoked in my life. I've done the right thing. Now I'm in a wheelchair, and now I'm doing what you're saying exactly I shouldn't be doing. And I get that. I shouldn't. And I wish, I wish I could not be in this chair, but I am in this chair. So what can I do? And, there's certain exercises I can do for my back. There's certain other exercises I sort of have to modify just because I can't do them normally. And I do that. I don't, it would be very easy to be sedentary, to never exercise, to never get out of the chair, but doing core work, doing back work, things like that. I mean, I'm 65 years old. I'm not going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger or anything like that, but I do want to have the ability to be as healthy as I can, being that I'm in a wheelchair.
Yeah, that's interesting, and thank you for bringing up that point because it just brings it even to my mind, or perhaps can point out for advertisers that yeah, there are a lot of different populations out there. I'm sure. I really wonder if whoever put that campaign out thought about people that are in wheelchairs. That's yeah, and especially in 2024, man, there's like a push to be what's the word, sensitive to all the different
Inclusive.
populations, inclusive and accessibility and everything. And I think, of course, it goes to a ridiculous degree a lot of the times. But like, yeah, this is a very basic kind of thing that, yeah, wow, that message really equated something that you're kind of stuck with to a choice. And it's very interesting because again, for 90 whatever percent of the population that it's applicable to, it is a good message. But it's fascinating to think about different perspectives. Hmm.
Yeah, it is. And I'm trying to remember there's a car brand, high scale, and I can't upscale brand. I can't remember what it was. And they were asking the CEO about why don't you advertise on television? And he said, our clientele doesn't spend their time watching television. They're out making things happen in life. And I
Yeah.
thought, ooh, that's a great way to respond to that. So
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's true. That it sums it up right there. With that regard, advertising, certain people are more susceptible to messaging and advertising than others. That's a whole thing. Um, so to dive into this next truth here, number three is understanding that what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And what does that one mean to you?
I guess let me tell you a story, and I think it illustrates this. I mean, I grew up, and I think you're old enough to know who Fred Rogers was, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Yeah.
Fred Rogers educated so many young people, including me, on public television growing up. When Rogers died in 2003, his family was going through his effects, and they found his wallet. And inside his wallet was a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers had written four simple words: life is for service. Zach, I've seen so many people in my life that feel they're born empty. And that when they get out of school and get into life, whatever that looks like for them, that then their job is to fill their empty self up. I got to make the most money, got to drive the nicest car, got to live in the nicest house, got to have all the gadgets and gizmos. And what I found is it's just the opposite. We're not born empty. We're born full. We're born with everything we need to be successful, however you define that word, in your life already inside of us. We just need to find it, pull it out, and use it for our benefit. So I find, at least in my life, that our job should not be to fill ourselves up. Our job in life should be to empty ourselves out with our unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of ourselves, but I think also for the betterment of our families, of our friends, of our communities, and of our countries. And I think once you make that paradigm shift about what you leave behind, it's not the stuff you're going to give people. It's those relationships. It's those connections you're going to have with other human beings.
Yeah, and this is such an interesting topic because people get so radical about it, even saying exactly what you're saying, to the point where then the lavish things in life become demonized, and people that do choose to afford themselves the wonderful luxuries of life that they have worked hard to afford, then that's looked at as a bad thing. And there's so many mental things going on where people fall into doing that. A lot of it's cope for their own failures or lack of being able to afford those things. And a lot of it is really a lack of understanding of the world. If someone steps out of a McLaren, more people are going to listen to them than if they step out of a Corolla. So in that way, the same person with the same service they wish to offer the world can get that message out more by showcasing, hey, I have whatever I know, the way I do things has gotten me at least financially successful, and that's merit. And the natural order of society and humanity is merit based. So when people, not that it's the only merit, finances, but it's a measurement of something: ability, savviness, communication. Often you have to do something, even just being at the right place at the right time. you did something, right? And so, and again, maybe some people didn't do anything, got handed money, whatever.
Yeah,
But
you're
as a
trusting.
general rule, if you've accrued resources, you've accrued power in that way, it just makes you someone that's automatically going to be listened to more, and it multiplies how much you can do your service in the world. So it's so asinine and immature when people demonize and think that it's mutually exclusive, having luxury goods and riches and finance and being a quote good person, you know?
I do. And I totally agree with it. There's nothing wrong with working hard and getting things that you want for your family and things like that. And I'll just go back to, simple, the 10 commandments. I don't remember which one it is. Do not covet your neighbor's goods. What that is saying is it's okay to want stuff in the world. It's okay to go after stuff. What it's not okay is to go after stuff because somebody else has it. And I think that's sort of where we get off the path. We start down our own path with everybody else, and then we say, oh, that guy's got $1,000,000, or that guy's driving the nicest car, or that guy's living in the nicest house. I want that. Do you want that because you want that, or do you want that because that person has it? I mean, why can't we just be grateful? Hey, Zach, you got $1,000,000. You close this deal, you got $1,000,000. That's great. I'm really happy for you. But we don't do that. We now get jealous of Zach because Zach has what we don't have. And I think we'd all be better off mentally and physically if we just, this is my path. Maybe I'm never going to make $1,000,000. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with my life. Just like Zach made $1,000,000, there's nothing wrong with Zach's life either. So you're right. They're not mutually exclusive. You can be wealthy and a good person and care about others and want to give and all that stuff. I didn't mean to come across like, hey, these two, you can be one or the other. No, you can be both. Absolutely.
No, you didn't come across that way at all. I just thought it an interesting point to elaborate because so many people fall into that trap,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
many people fall into that trap, I think. And it's so ridiculous because then when someone does want to be helpful to humanity, some people will say, "Oh, well, you drive that car. You could have donated that money to charity." Well, all right. What about the other hundreds of thousands that I did? This is a hypothetical person, but like, you know what I mean? People are so, you know, it's people are just crazy, man. And yeah, the point that you raised about not wanting something because someone else has it or whatever. It's like there's a healthy way to take inspiration from those that are killing it and crushing it and doing great and have done great. I think where it turns sour is really when people don't believe in themselves. Because to see someone else crushing it and know that I'm going to get that too because I can and I want to, like then you can celebrate other people. I feel like winners more often celebrate the wins of other people. And losers, those that are losing currently or have lost historically, are more so the ones that turn sour because it's a lack of belief in themselves to get it if they want it, if they want it. So then they try and like drag people down of like, oh no, you can't do that. But we're deviating from the point a little bit. What is it that you truly wish to weave in the hearts of the people around you? Well, what is your, lasting memory that you wish to leave behind?
Yeah. I guess, again, let me tell you another story. One of my nurses who takes care of me for the tumors I have in my lungs is a former hospice nurse. And for those of your audience who don't know about hospice, it's people who take care of others at the end of their life. It's end of life care. And she gave me a book to read. And the book was called Imagine Heaven. And it's a book about people who have near death experiences. And I learned a lot from the book. But one of the big takeaways from reading that book was that no matter who the person having the near death experience saw during that experience, whether it was God or a saint or an angel or a friend or a relative, almost everybody got asked one question: how do you treat my people? In other words, how do we take care of each other? And I mean, Zach, 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember I was even here. But what I'd like to be remembered for are those connections, are those relationships that I have with other people. And I'm a person, I love to go deep with people. I mean, I was listening to a podcast where there's a professor at the University of Chicago, a psychology professor, who does this himself, but also makes it an assignment for his class. And the idea is you go out and you get on a bus, and in 3 questions, you want to be deep with somebody. So sit down next to somebody. First question, hey, how's it going? Oh, it's going fine. How are you? Fine. Second question, what do you do for a living? And I'm just making this up. I'm a doctor. Oh, third question, have you always wanted to be a doctor? No, I grew up on a farm. I wanted to be a vet, but X, Y, and Z. Or no, I always wanted to be a doctor because my dad was a doctor, my mom was a doctor, my uncle was a doctor, and they were very influential on me because my parents died when I was whatever it ends up being. Now all of a sudden you're deep with somebody. You're understanding why they're doing what they're doing in their life. And we don't do that. I think social media allows us to stay on the surface with people and just kind of, oh, I like what you're wearing, or I like your hair, or I like what we never, I'm not going to say never. We rarely go deep with human beings. And I love going deep with people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of my favorite things about this podcast, honestly. It's like, you could really, in a 90-minute span, get to know someone if you take the opportunity to get to know someone. And it's such a weird psychological thing, because like I feel like I know you to a large degree, but also obviously I have no idea who you are beyond this screen. Like you might not even be real. You might be wearing a mask. I don't know you. I just see you as pixels on the screen.
Right.
It's a strange thing that this modern era has allowed us to do, to have these internet friends,
Yeah. And you're right. And we don't know whether they're right or they're real or where they're coming from. And it allows us to sort of hide, as you said, behind a mask. And, sort of like the Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the guy behind the curtain. That's not real. No, that is real. What's behind the curtain is real. What you're seeing is not real. And I remember when I had my leg amputated, found out I had these tumors in my lungs, I went with my wife to the mortuary and to the cemetery and to the church, and I planned my funeral. And because I do podcasts like yours, or I speak in person about motivation and the need to keep moving forward, I actually got some brushback from people who commented that planning my funeral was in some way defeatist. Find these people that the last time I checked, we're all going to die. I don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now. Every one of us is going to die, but not every one of us is going to live. And I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb that I loved. I heard it years ago, and it goes like this: when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
Man, that just gave me chills, man. That's beautiful. Yeah, the relationship with death in the modern Western world is such a broken one, really. People have this strange relationship with death as if in all circumstances it's the worst thing in the world, when it's literally the only guarantee in life, like that's it, and it's inevitable, and people do all sorts of crazy things and have all sorts of crazy bad times in their own minds surrounding death, and it's such a strange culture we have of, oh, if someone's not doing so well, oh, put them on life support for as long as possible. Like, you're not even living at that point. Like, what kind of quality of life is that? That's atrocious, And I'm not saying it's atrocious that anyone stays alive longer than, whatever their first brush with death is, but there's a lot of suffering that comes from absolutely thinking like death is the worst thing in this world. And people don't want to think about it. People don't want to talk about it. Yeah, like you said, people think you're crazy for just putting contingents, not even contingencies, but just getting ducks in a row. Like that. And to me, that's only a positive and a beautiful thing. That means that you honestly wanted to take the stress off of your loved ones of having to deal with. Someone's going to have to deal with it. Like, someone's going to have to deal with it. Why not you? To me, that makes a lot of sense. I even, back in university, before I knew better than to go to university, I attended a death and dying class. The whole subject matter was death and dying and talking about death in different cultures and reading books about death and different philosophies around death. And I don't remember the professor's name, but she was wonderful. She was a wonderful older woman that really seemed to make peace with death, and in that way made peace with life. And like she wasn't sickly, at least outwardly, but it was just a very fascinating area of study that she at least committed that chunk of her life to. And it was just a really interesting philosophical thing to explore and get people's perspectives on in the class based on their different cultures and where they came from. And I think back now, I think back to a lot of things in university now and like how different my answers would be and my viewpoints would be from what I thought back then. I think I was still a stubborn atheist back then. Um, and yeah, it's just to recount on thinking about death, really. I think more people could benefit from it because it really does make you live better.
And you're absolutely right. And I was just going to, I've not read a lot of Stoic philosophy, but I have read some of it. And the Stoic philosophers used to talk about what they called memento mori, which is Latin for remember death. Remember you're going to die. Because as you said, death focuses what's important, which is life. And there's sort of the old Steve Jobs quote that says, everybody wants to get to heaven, but nobody wants to die to get there, And I think in a lot of ways that's true. Well, I don't want to die, but you're right. And I talked about this nurse who gave me the Imagine Heaven book. She also gave me another book called Being Mortal, which was written by a doctor and is about exactly what you were talking about. People that okay, we're going to do this surgery. We're going to basically cut you from your Adam's apple down to your pubic bone, lay you open, do all this kind of stuff to you. And oh, by the way, there's maybe a 1% chance that this is going to work. And so
Let me go.
yeah, we're going to put you through all that. And it's like, at some point in time, it's okay to say, I'm done. I'm through.
Yeah.
It's okay to die.
Yeah, and it weaves so perfectly into your point in that when I think about death in any sort of regard, it just makes me want to work harder to
Yeah.
leave a better whatever I leave behind for everyone I leave it behind for. I think the biggest thing that scares me about death is dying before I'm able to leave, my legacy behind and set everyone in my family and for generations to come up for absolute success and wellness and to, die before making the impact I want to make in the world. That's the worst thing. And so in that way, I don't cower away from the feeling. I use that to galvanize myself to keep going, to not, pick up Instagram and doom scroll, to not waste time in some way that is not beneficial to my cause and to my work. I specifically think of that thought. If I feel myself slacking for a moment, I need to work harder. One day I'm going to die. Time is finite here. I
Would you
think
say you're the exception or the rule?
in what way? Like the way most
And,
people
I
live?
mean, do you think most people think the way you think, or do you think most people think, I don't want to talk about death. It doesn't do anything for me. It just scares me.
I think, yeah, I think I'm not, special, but I think I'm probably part of the few.
I would agree.
Yeah. I think more people would benefit from adopting that. And that's why I share mental models like that on this show. That's the whole show. Yeah, I think if people are able to come to think like that, they live a more fulfilled and effective life. Because I know I sure have.
Absolutely. I do too. And death does not scare me. And I've got, I hang around with a group of guys in my neighborhood. And anytime I bring up, I went to the cemetery and they're, oh, no, we're not talking about that. It is really uncomfortable for them, but they're also all healthy, and
Yeah.
younger than I am and things like that. And it's like, you know what? Okay, we don't have to talk about it. I get it. But one day you're going to be sitting where I'm sitting, and I hope you've thought about this, or I hope the way I live my life is an example that you don't need to be afraid of death, but death does focus what's important in life, and that's life.
It's so crazy to me how few men in the world, grown adult males, are unable to just have a conversation about any topic.
Yeah.
You know? Like, what the fuck? I don't want to offend particularly these people if you care about them, but Jesus Christ, man. Like, you can't have a conversation. You can't entertain thoughts, especially those of inevitabilities. Like, how can you be so wavering of a person inside as an adult man that you just can't even explore a topic? It's so sad. And the only true word to describe how I think of it, it really is pathetic. It's
I
very
agree.
unfortunate.
I mean, but there were also people that, I sort of had in the back of my mind that if anything bad happened to me, something catastrophic, that those people would be in the foxhole with me. Those people would
Yeah.
not abandon me. And several of those people, especially when I got cancer, at 50, were like, ooh, wait, ooh, no, 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 no. Can't deal with that. Don't want to deal with that. Kind of need to back away. And the opposite of that is true. There are people that I never expected to be in my corner that have never left me during this 12 plus year journey through cancer. So, I mean, I think some people leave, some people show up. I'm comfortable with that. I can't deal with if, it's like I got enough stuff on my plate dealing with cancer. I can't deal with your inadequacies not to be able to talk about it. Go figure that out. Go get more resilient and stuff like that. And if you want to come back, I'm here.
Oh, absolutely. It is so essential to curate a reality in which cowardice does not exist because you are absolutely correct. To surround yourselves with those that have cowardice in their hearts in any sort of way is only a liability, and that liability is going to show its face when it is least convenient because it is not when things are good that it is an option to either make the brave or cowardly choice. It's when things get tough, when you need to rely on the people around you is when the people show their true colors. And yeah, that's why it's so important to smell this kind of stuff out and know who you're dealing with and understand that there are indicators of people's true soul really, and where they are currently that get shown. And it can be very dangerous, like, yeah, you were facing an illness, and that's awful, and that's very much a time of need, but it could get even more serious than that. You could be walking down the street with your boys that you think are there and going to be there with you, and someone runs up with a knife. What do you think they're going to do?
Skedaddle.
They're going to skedaddle.
Yeah.
It's a serious thing. And a lot of people live in a world where they think even that kind of thing is extreme. And oh, how can you even say that? How could that ever happen? Well, that's the realities of life. And even in the suburbs of America, that's becoming the reality of life a lot more. So you better understand who you're with because it's
I mean, we always hear about that though, from the mental point of view. You are the product of the five people you hang around with the most and things like that. And I think that's true. I absolutely believe that to be true. But you're right. It's like, if something goes down right here, one, are you gonna stand up, to it, for it? I mean, a lot of times I'll talk to my nurses, that are in with me when I'm reacting, and it's like, what would you do if there was an active shooter on the unit here? Which, like you say, is it's not uncommon. These things happen. Oh, I don't know. Never even thought about it. I'm
yep.
like, I said, I'm not asking you. We used to, in the police academy, they were talking about, condition red, condition yellow, condition green. I'm like, I'm not telling you to live in a paranoid state where, you're constantly always looking over your shoulder. But I think it's incumbent upon all of us, just given society, to live in sort of that condition yellow. Just be
Yeah.
aware of your surroundings. Just be aware of the people that aren't acting right, or the hair on the back of your neck is standing up about that individual. Yeah, those things are there for a reason. God gave those to you. It's like, I'm uncomfortable. I don't like. Get the heck out of there then. But people don't do. Oh, I'm over exaggerating and stuff like that. No, hair on the back of your neck goes up. I mean, when my partner and I were together, when we were riding in a police car, if we were going to say a noise run, knock on the door. Hey, please turn your TV down. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Your neighbors are trying to sleep. Have a nice day. Bye. And one of us said, you know what? I got a bad feeling about this. I mean, obviously we still had to go to the run, but it was like, we're going to be extra cautious because one of us has a feeling that something's not right here. So it wasn't, we didn't dismiss it because it was no big deal. It was, no, we're going to pay attention to it and we're just going to be as cautious as we can.
Absolutely. And hopefully it's nothing.
Exactly.
But you're paranoid until you're right.
Yeah.
And all it takes is one time of failing to be paranoid or aware to have severe consequences, death or otherwise. That's all it takes. And, people just aren't tactical.
No.
Life is war in some way, shape, or form. There is threats. There are threats. There is danger. There are things that happen, accidental or nefarious. The world is nuts in so many ways. The world is also beautiful and contains beauty, but also bad things happen. And it happens to people most often who think it won't happen to them until it does, And yeah, there's so many levels to this. It doesn't have to be I'm having a bad time. So, oh my God, this is going to get me. This is going to get me. But it would be wise for all men to, when they walk into a room, know where the exits are, take an inventory of who else is in the room, stay aware of, if you can see outside the windows of wherever you are, just stay aware of what's going on, who's coming in, who's going out. Like, it doesn't have to be an all-consuming thing. At a certain point, it just becomes your default where you're just, all right, okay, this is a scenario. I'm good here. And it's
and what are we always taught? Who is the victim? The victim is the person who's unaware. The victim is the person that's got their head down in their phone. It's not the person that's walking to the car with their groceries that's kind of got their head on a swivel, just looking around. You're not going to be the victim, and more than likely not going to be the victim. It's going to be the person that's going into the store with their head down, not paying attention. Criminals they're human too. We don't like hard targets. We like easy targets. Go to the easy target. It's true.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And like the phone is one thing, but we got people that are completely eliminating their sense of auditory, awareness by headphones, ear pods, playing something. Like, you could possibly not even hear a semi truck running you over. You like, what? How do you do that? And you're absolutely correct in that, thieves and robbers and murderers or whatever are opportunists. They are less likely to pick the person that is walking down the street confident and aware and looking around than the person who's
just being down the street. I mean, I used to, when we were on SWAT, our headphones had one, the one ear was covered, the other ear wasn't, so that we could hear if somebody was walking around us or something like that. We don't have to have two ears covered. And that was totally tactical. Yes, you want to be able to hear what's going on from what's happening in the event, but you also want to be here. If you're in the bushes or something like that, is somebody walking by? You want to be aware of that? That's just a safety issue.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it really, it's not just about yourself.
No.
Think about the men out there walking down the street with their families, the women they love, their children, even their pets. Like, if you truly love anyone outside of yourselves, these things are necessities. These things are bare minimums even of being a man. Because if you can't protect those that you love, what is your love worth?
Right.
Very little. Besides feel good, nonsense. Like, yeah, I think that there's too few men out there that just consider any sort of tactical existence.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. They don't know that if something kicks off, what happens to your body? You get tunnel vision. You don't see things in your peripheral. Your hearing dissipates. That's when people, I had a gun battle. I didn't even hear the shots go off. Guns are loud. People hear guns and things like that. Your fine motor skills go out the window. And people are like, why do you practice so much with your weapon? because I need it to be muscle memory. I can't rely on, oh, I got to snap, Yeah, it's got to be muscle memory. That's why we practice the way we do. And people don't get that. One of my nurses was telling me I was out taking my dog for a walk. It was, right around dusk, and I saw this guy, and it looked like he was kind of rummaging through a car. And I said, "Oh, what did you do?" She's like, "I didn't know what to do." I'm like, "How close were you to your house? 2 houses down? You think maybe you could go inside, call 911, say, I think this guy, going through my neighbor's car?" Oh, yeah, I guess I could have done that. People don't think about it. Now, when the disaster happens, that's not the time to start thinking what's going to happen. You got to sort of plan for these things beforehand.
Oh, absolutely. And this goes back exactly to a conversation that we were having last time about how the world has allowed people to go soft. And all of these structures of the world have allowed people to go soft. And all of these programs have allowed people to go soft to the extent where you can be someone that when shit goes down, you fumble with your gun and fumble with your holster and still be on the Secret Service caring for one of the most important people in the world.
Yes.
Case in point, like
Yep.
it's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing. So yeah, I think what's very important is what we weave in the hearts of other people, not just when we are gone, but while we are still here. And as a man, I think it is so essential for the women and children and even other men around you to know that if you're there, they're good.
Yeah.
That is one of the best things a man can give to those he loves while he's there as well. Knowing that he has you and he's watching out and he's got it down and he's going to make sure everything's good and safe and well and optimal. And there's, and not feeling that way about their man is the cause of a lot of strife of women, a lot of chaos internally and then presented externally in relationships is directly a result of not enough men being that guy.
Yeah, I agree.
So the last truth here, remembering that as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. Again, another very straightforward one, but please, why did that make the list?
It made the list, and again, I'm going to tell you another story. Of course I know.
I love it. I love these stories.
True story. Happened back in the 1950s at Johns Hopkins University here in the United States. And there was a professor there that did a very simple experiment with rats. And he took rats and he put them in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as those rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he took the exact same rats and put them back in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, on average, those rats treaded water for 60 hours. Now, I mean, think about that. First time, 15 minutes. It's not like you're going to flunk a test or your business is going to go under or your marriage is going to end. You're going to die. Your life is going to be over. And the second time around, 60 hours, which taught me two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives, that if we know we're doing the right thing, maybe not today, maybe not this month, maybe not even this year, but more than likely, somewhere down the road, we will get close to or get exactly what we want. And the second thing it taught me was just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. And I'm going to bring this totally full circle back to the first truth. So, your brain is telling you, well, let me back up. I think everybody's got a breaking point. Don't get me wrong. But I think that breaking point is so much further down the road than we ever thought it was. Because I think we go back to truth number one, control your mind. Your brain is telling you, this hurts. This is uncomfortable. Knock it off. Stop doing this. And we listen to it. But what kind of like a marathon runner, we always hear about marathon runners hitting that. There's a point in the race where they hit the wall, as they call it. I just don't think I can go on. I've got no more carbs or anything like that. But they always find that if they can keep moving forward, even if it's at a slower pace, they can push through that and they sort of get their second wind. And so I think it's incredibly important to realize that just because your brain's telling you to stop, this is uncomfortable, if you can push forward, if you can keep going, even during that adversity, you're never going to be able to be defeated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good life of constant progression and growth involves finding that wall and continuing to push past it, and then finding the next one, and then finding the next one that you think you can't push past, and then pushing past it anyway, and it's a fascinating thing how exactly if you think it can be done, then you might end up being right. And it reminds me of the athletic statistics. In every athletic sport, the records have only gotten better and better and better and better. And again, just to throw some random numbers out there, I don't follow whatever sports, but like, say someone does a mile at 6 minutes. At some point, that was the fastest anyone ever recorded a mile. Then, oh, that's possible. Then someone broke into the fives, and then someone broke into the fours. You know what I'm saying? Like that continues to grow as it enters the realm of possibility of human ability of someone else even. Then it starts with yourself, and then if you do it yourself, then you've done it, so then you can keep going later. And back to the experiment though that you brought up, it's very fascinating because those rats gained hope because they were in a dire situation. I mean, someone put them in a dire situation, but
Right.
they were in the dire situation. And then they were saved externally. They were picked up by that hand externally. And I think most people have never had that. They've never had a meaningful helping hand when they were drowning. And I think a lot of people just drown and silently are drowning and never really do have that helping hand that comes and saves them that first time or any time to even show them that they are worth saving, let alone it's possible to save them. So do you think that helping hand can come from within in someone that first time to show them that they can be saved?
I do. And I'm going to tell you another story. So, I have a friend of mine who's a former Navy SEAL. And the SEALs talk about what they call their 40% rule. And for most people, I mean, the Navy SEALs and other countries have, these paramilitary groups. I mean, these are some of the toughest people in the world. They endure some of the most difficult training to get into these. And basically what the SEALs say is that if you're done, if you're at the end of your rope, if you just can't go on, you're only at 40% of your maximum. And you still have another 60% left in reserve to give to yourself. So when you get to that point where I can't do it, I'm not waiting for somebody to come and save me. I'm not waiting for somebody to come and throw me a lifeline. I can do this myself. I want to get off the couch and I want to go, run. Oh, no, it's comfortable here. It's easy. I just want to stay on the couch and things like that. If you want to do it, I guess what I'm saying is you can do it. It's physically possible for you to do it. I'm done. I'm spent. I can't go on. No, you think you're at that point, you're only 40% of your maximum. You still have more than 50%, 60% to give to yourself to keep going, to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time saying that you can't do it is an excuse for not doing it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
In a lot of different ways. How many people are saying, oh, I didn't sleep good last night, so I can't do this, this, and this to, the proper ability. Like, come on, like you have a thing to do. Sorry, you didn't get enough sleep, but you still have the thing to do. Or, I can't do anything else anymore. I'm hungry. Like you're not starving. Your body's not at the brink of starvation. You're going to be okay. You can go longer without food. There's people who have no food and are surviving for months. Like you who ate this morning or last night can do whatever you need to do within this day and then eat later. Or maybe even eat tomorrow. You'll be okay. But there's so many people that are so weak-minded that they just cling to whatever bit of discomfort thing, they can attribute their lack of achievement or lack of performance. And it's funny. There's someone that shared a story that or shared that, like, say you're a fighter, right? And you lose. It doesn't say lost, but he was tired that day and his girlfriend was yelling at him and his dog died. Like, it just says lost.
Yeah.
So if that's all the world is going to remember, that you either performed or didn't perform, what do any of the preconditions even really matter? It's up to you to take whatever cards you're dealing with and play them in such a way that you win. Doesn't matter anything beyond that. And thinking that you can't do something is is just shooting yourself in the foot, and you're going to be right. You're going to be right until you get rid of that mindset.
I love the quote by Usain Bolt, who kind of broke the world record for the 100-yard dash. He said, I spent 4 years learning how to run 9 seconds. And so many people give up on their dreams after a couple months. And,
Yeah.
when you put it into that perspective, I spent 4 years training to run a 9.5800, 4 years to do that. And people are like, oh, this is uncomfortable. It's only been a month. It's only been 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. I'm going to quit. I'm going to give up. I think when you put that in perspective, like, yeah, no.
Yeah, we live in such an instant gratification world, and everything's become easy and fast. And when things aren't that way, and most deep and meaningful achievements aren't that way, it gets hard. It gets hard because of all the programming to just acquire things easy. I think people, it's a survival mechanism to want to achieve things as efficiently and quickly as possible. And when that's catered to for your entire life in many regards, then yeah, it does get difficult to make yourself experience difficulty. But you do just have to keep moving forward. Like, that just is it. And so, exactly your point, the last truth is such a wonderful thing to leave off with, that if you don't quit, you can never be defeated. You're still in the game. You still have a chance. You're still alive. You're still kicking. Maybe you're battered and bruised, but you're still in the fight. So you can keep fighting, or you can lay over and die. That's really all there is. And I know which one sounds better to me.
And
So
I'm right there with you.
yeah. So Terry, what in these closing minutes here, please remind our audience, what kind of services are you offering the world now? Where can people find more Terry if they love your perspectives and the way you say things? I think you had a book, if I recall correctly. Where can people find that? Please plug everything that you do and offer to the world.
Sure. So I wrote a book. It's called Sustainable Excellence: 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. It's a book you can get pretty much anywhere. You can get a book online, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Apple iBooks, wherever you get your book. I also have a blog/website that I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch every day. I put up a thought for the day. And with that thought usually comes a question about how maybe you could apply that thought into your life. I also have my social media links there. You can also leave me a message. That's at motivationalcheck.com.
Love it. Love it. And amongst our messages and the assorted truths that we've just left off with, are there any closing thoughts that you'd really like to drive home for our listeners?
Yeah, let me tell you one more story. If
Please do.
Kind of a short story. One of the nurses that was taking care of me recently asked me, what was it like to have your foot amputated in 2018 and your leg amputated, in 2020? And I told her it certainly hasn't been easy. When you're 6'8", learning to walk again, falling is not an option. You get hurt from this height. But what I did tell her was, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Zach. That's who everybody who's listening to us really is. And we spend a tremendous amount of time, working on the exterior. We go to the gym, we eat right, we get enough rest, we reduce stress. And I'm certainly not going to tell you not to do those things. You absolutely should. But what I am going to suggest is maybe every day, focus a little bit more on working on who you really are, your heart, your mind, and your soul. We know at some point in our lives, this body is going to die. It's going to go away. It's going to turn to dust. But your heart, your mind, and your soul, those things I believe are eternal. Those things live on. And I just don't think we spend nearly as much time working on them as we do on the exterior of ourselves.
Absolutely. And there's always more work to do. There's always more figuring ourselves out and more layers to ourselves to dive into and more to understand about why we think the way we think and why we do the things we do and why we feel the way we feel. And so many people, especially men, don't ever take the time to really dissect themselves and understand themselves. And in that way, I don't think that optimal performance, even in external endeavors, can ever be reached because I think without a true foundational comprehension of who you are, how can you ever really understand your place in the world and your interaction with other people and how to, really get the most out of this life that you've been given? I think a lot of men, especially, just dive into external pursuits and think that all else is a waste of time. And it really couldn't be farther from the truth. Not only does understanding yourself to such a deep level optimize your own existence, but it also helps you relate and interact with, and then in turn care for those that you love and care for. So that is a fantastic message. I always advocate for people taking audits of themselves, and that's something you should do all the time, perhaps each and every day, and at the end of each and every day. And so, Terry, this another hour just flew by. I feel like I could just sit and talk to you for days upon days. Really, really thank you for jumping on with me again. And I thank you for coming on the show.
You're more than welcome, Zach. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I feel the same way. I could spend hours learning from your wisdom and that. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Terry. Have a wonderful rest of your day, brother.
You do the same.